Hello, everyone. My name is Gus.
Oi, Sue.
That's okay.
Amadrado.
Wow.
Portuguese. That's
Okay.
Portuguese. I just got back from Brazil. I mean, I pick up languages quick. Hi, I'm Woody. That's what I said. That was clearly hi, I'm Woody.
Sometimes you struggle with English, so let's.
Oi, soy.
Let's be realistic.
Amadrado. Isn't dorado it's a fish? It's like a dolphin. I don't know how they.
No idea.
Referred it that way, but anyway, what were we doing?
We have a great video to react to today, especially because it's about rebreathers. So that's always good. Sometimes we react to videos about like sharks and stuff, which I even though people think I have a PhD in marine life and whatnot.
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm not an expert on that, but we happen to have a few hundred dives in rebreathers.
Yes.
And we'll be able to add our commentary. And that's kind of a secondary to the main thing, which is it feels like hundreds of requests to react to this video. Like everyone reached out to us and said, we want to get your thoughts on that.
Okay.
So that's why we're here. This channel is, this diver is a very experienced rebreather diver. His name is Dominic. Great guy. Does a really good job, kind of narrating what happened. And one of the things I wanted to do is before we get started is number one, go check out his channel. But number two, I want to give him props for sharing kind of his mistakes and agreeing to hey, being vulnerable. Like, hey, I messed up. Here's what happened. And once I messed up, here's all the things I did to recover from this emergency.
Or once I messed up, you ended up on Dive Talk. I'm just saying. But that's because we mess up.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Like we've shared many videos. I mean, this whole notion that you don't mess up. But really what I love to know always is, okay, you mess up here and there, but what did you do? There's no perfection.
Exactly.
If you mess up, did you handle the training calmly and correctly and ultimately get out of the dive and come to the surface?
Right.
Then you didn't mess up.
Right.
You see what I mean? Like you only messed up if you're still down there after the dive is over.
Right, that's the ultimate. What I'll say is his video is a little bit over an hour. I cut some of the stuff out to make it shorter. If you want to check out his whole video, I put a link in the description. Every time we react to a video, if it's on YouTube, the link will be in the description. Because people comment, it's like, you guys talk too much. Well, it's called Dive Talk.
Talk is the second word we're going to.
What are you talking about? But anyway, if you want zero of the talk, just click on the link and go check out the original video, right? But I cut down, I don't know, like 15 minutes of it or whatever. And so what I'll say is, Dominic, he's diving. I think it's a Revo or an AP Inspiration. I think it's an AP Inspiration. One of those rebreathers.
Which neither one of us are trained on.
It's a back mount rebreather.
Okay.
And is an automatic or electronic rebreather.
Okay.
And so go ahead and explain for people that are non-divers, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, I assume they use shear water. I don't know. I don't dive this rebreather. But basically what happens is shear water or some other computer can basically maintain your PO2 by firing a solenoid. And what that does is it will inject oxygen to increase your PO2 to whatever set point you put in your dive computer if you fly it, which means dive it, in that electronic mode.
Correct.
So if you don't, all electronic rebreathers can also be flown in a manual mode where you can cut that off. Number one, you may not want it. Number two, if it messes up, you definitely do not want it injecting oxygen or diluent at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So you could turn that off and do what we dive. Well, we dive a mechanical. It's sort of a hybrid between manual and electronic.
Yeah.
That just means ours has a constant mass flow injecting oxygen all the time. But long story short, that's the explanation of what an electronic rebreather does.
Yeah. So basically, we mix gases, a diluent and an oxygen gas inside the rebreather. An electronic rebreather, like Woody said, does that for you. You don't have to do anything. By reading from a computer, it knows which gas to add. And this is very useful, especially as you're ascending and descending, because when you're descending, the gases inside the unit will compress. It's called Boyle's Law. And the computer and the solenoid and the unit itself is injecting the right gas, which on the way down will be diluent. It's injecting diluent into the dive. So anyway, this guy Dominic and his buddies, James and James, which we'll see them in the video, are going down into a wreck that is about 200 feet down, so 60 plus meters down. And anyway, he's on the down line, he's going down, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
You see, I've been in the descent while we've been talking about the rebreather. I've just put on my tag on the lazy shot, and I'm now heading down. As I'm going down,
by the way, that's really
ADV,
cool. With those lights on the way down, is that to signify certain depths?
I don't know. I think it's just to find the line. Like to find it, like you're done with the wreck, let's go back to the line.
Makes total sense.
You know, like sometimes you're in wrecks, especially in the Keys, where multiple boats will connect to the wreck, and you're like, wait, what is our down line? Is it that one or that one over there? It's it gets complicated.
Well, it's interesting. I've seen it on the tag line. You know, that's the line in the back of the boat.
Yes.
When you're in the Keys, you want to grab it because of the current.
Yeah.
And they'll have lights on that, especially for night diving. But I don't remember if I've actually ever seen it on a down line, but I love it. That's all I wanted to say.
Pretty awesome.
And maintaining the breathing loop at a level that's comfortable for me to breathe. You can also, this is incredible, I mean, we're only 47 metres down, and you can start to see the top of the wreck there. It's the steering quadrant, which does stand up about 15 or 16 metres high.
All I know is I want to be there.
It's a great sign that the visibility is going to be good. You can also see strobes belonging to divers in front of me. They've put them on the line already, and I'm going to be putting mine on shortly.
Oh,
as I say,
so that's like cave diving. That's like a cookie. So let me explain. Yeah. I think that's what he was just saying.
Yeah,
I didn't
think
know.
So.
So basically, what that means is if you're, I think, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's saying, hey, if you see my strobe, it means I have not come back up that down line yet. I'm still down there.
Yeah.
Just like a cookie on a line where we make a jump, where we're coming off of a main line and jumping.
Yeah.
We put a cookie to let, well, two reasons. I'm still not back, and if I lost my light, it's a non-directional indicator where I can feel my way. Oh, I need to go back out that way. But that's really interesting.
It's a way to communicate with the rest of the team that, hey, I'm still down on the wreck. I'm still. But the challenge with that is if you have current and you get swept away from the wreck and the downline, then it looks like you haven't come up, and maybe you did come up. You know what I'm saying? Like you shoot at DSMB or whatever away from the wreck and you come up, now your light is down there. So that,
I'm sure there's procedures, but I don't know. I do know that sometimes if they're doing this kind of diving, then they'll bring two DSMBs, and there's it's known that if you fire two together, it sort of means that you have a problem wherever you are. But still, to your point, how would they have known to go see those two at DS? So I don't know. Anyway.
The fact that you commented that lets people know that you haven't watched this video, because some of that will come up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
The people are like, oh, you guys always watch it before. No,
I've never seen it.
Exactly.
Sent here, my loop is being filled full of gas using that auto add function. At this moment in time, I don't know that there's anything wrong with my rebreather. Everything just seems fine. I'm really excited about the dive. Visibility is great. I mean, you can see a diver there off the back of the stern on the seabed. That's got to be 10, maybe 15 meters visibility there, which is incredible. There's also loads of ambient light down here as well, which is quite unusual on this wreck. It can be quite dark. I've probably done it 6 or 7 times, and these are definitely some of the best conditions I've dived it in. So I'm on the wreck. Now, what I'm thinking at this point is the last time I dived it, which was actually only a month or two before this dive, I found a plate, quite a nice plate. It had the logo on for the Furness Withy line, and that's who owned the ship, the East Point. It was sunk in March 1917, and about 5,000 tons, so quite a big ship, and really nice. So if I'm honest, I quite fancy getting myself another plate. I think I know where they are, so I'm going to be
where is it? He hasn't said that yet.
I don't know where it is, but it looks cold.
It's cold. We both were said the same.
Just beforehand, though, I spot something else, and you can see it just in the left of the picture there. Not 100% certain what it is, so I'm going to turn it over and have a look at it. So all this time, I'm thinking there's nothing wrong with my rebreather. The dive is all going great. I'm enjoying myself. I'm looking around and I'm finding stuff. So that is all good. What is actually happening though is, unbeknownst to me, is there is a very small leak in the top of my canister for my scrubber. And what's happening is a small trickle of water is getting into the rebreather, or rather a little bit of air is leaking out of the rebreather and water is going in.
So do a quick pause. One of the things that we do for everybody watching that may not know about rebreathers is when we go down, and I like to do it at about 20 feet because that's a big pressure change, that first atmosphere.
Yeah.
So if it's going to leak, we go like this, like, hey, quick. And by the way, it's quick. Like some people spend like an hour. No. If you got bubbles, in 2 seconds you can see them. And also you want to do it at 20 feet because when you first jump in, there's just bubbles inside like the material of the wing and stuff. That's different than the bubbles we're looking for.
When you have a leak.
Yeah. So and the other thing is that, at least from the rebreathers that we dive, if you have a slow leak going into the rebreather, it wouldn't take too long before you start hearing like almost like a gurgling sound when you breathe in and out of the loop, like rather than just right. You can hear it like and it starts to. Oh man, that's unusual. I have water coming in.
Yeah.
So I don't know on his how long that takes before he would notice. On a Revo, I don't know how long it would take to notice it's either breathing harder or I'm hearing gurgling.
Yeah. But yeah, what you're saying is the bubble check. So when we jump into every dive, we're like, look at me, bubbles. And that's the signal for bubble. And then we look at each other, you're good. And that's it. So it's pretty quickly. But if you have a stream of bubbles coming out of the unit itself, that's a problem.
I would end the dive personally.
Yeah.
If I saw a big stream coming out of your rebreather, I'd be like, dude, you can't recover from that.
Yeah,
underwater.
What's happening is that the auto add on the diluent is detecting every time the loop volume drops below what I can breathe. It detects that and it puts a little bit more diluent in.
Yeah, so basically, imagine the rebreather is full of air, and we call this a minimum loop volume, which is you have this minimum amount of air to breathe. As you're going down, you don't notice that you have air escaping because you're adding regardless. Even if you don't have a leak, you're adding and adding and adding because your gas is compressing. So you're constantly adding diluent on the way down. But once you get to a point, you don't really touch anything. You don't add diluent. You don't add oxygen. It's like great. The rebreather likes to just stay there.
Yes.
You don't touch anything. And what he's saying is that he's hearing that the mechanism is adding diluent and adding diluent and adding diluent. He's like, well, what the hell is going on? Because now you're at that level where you shouldn't be adding anything. That's what's happening, and that's where the automation is taking place.
Now, at this point in the dive, I don't notice it. And I don't notice it because I've just come down the descent. I'm quite excited, but also I'm still changing depth continuously.
Right.
You see, I'm going down and I'm coming up. And every time you change depth on a rebreather, it's normal for you to lose a bit of gas when you go up and then put a bit of gas in when you go down. Yeah. And these kind of things, because I've done so much diving, these kind of things have almost become subconscious.
Yeah,
so I'm not
true.
really thinking too much about it. So, but the rebreather is very slowly starting to fill up with water. And I'm also using gas from my diluent cylinder at a far greater rate than I would do normally.
But there's a second, even bigger risk that I would like to quickly explain.
Yeah.
The other thing that can happen for most rebreathers is that if you have water inside the scrubber, the sorb, that's the chemical, that's the stuff that takes out your CO2. It basically can turn into lime, and it becomes alkaline. Not acidic, it becomes alkaline, which is the same thing like an alkaline battery. So I want you to imagine like busting open an alkaline battery and pouring that in your mouth. It would burn your mouth off. right? So it's toxic. You can have a caustic cocktail that could burn your throat. You could lose your. I mean, if you would immediately be like and get off and bail out, right? If that hits your mouth. So I don't know at what point enough water in his unit would start to become caustic, but it could happen. I haven't watched this video, so we'll see.
I was waiting a little bit to talk about, something related to that, but since we paused it, let's just talk about it. So here's the thing with the chemical that rebreathers use. The scrubber chemical that takes away the CO2 when you breathe out, will become, as you mentioned, toxic when it gets wet. The interesting part about this thing is that dry is not, like, it doesn't burn your mouth.
Nothing.
You can take it dry and put it in your mouth and it's not going to burn it. For some reason, once the water touches it, acid.
It's a chemical reaction, which you remember that one slide on that rebreather course that we once looked at?
Yeah.
And it had literally a physics equation that me and you were like,
what is this?
That's why.
Yeah.
So if you really wanted to show people, you could put a quick screenshot of that formula, and that would be the response. It's a chemical reaction.
But what I want to add is, even though it will burn your mouth, it still works. The sorb still works even when it's wet. And
I think it
works, and that's why he's breathing.
But
because
I think it becomes
because the water hasn't gotten to his
Yes.
mouth. Yeah.
I think it becomes less and less efficient, though, as it gets more and more wet. But I'd have to get some maybe.
It could be, but it still works. It would still scrub the CO2. It would still work. It might not be as efficient because the sorb is affected by temperature too. So I assume getting wet also affects it. But it's not like it stops scrubbing CO2 just because it's wet. It still works.
Well, if you're wrong,
that's why he's still
1,000 comments
the
coming.
loop volume had been brought up to the right level for the depth, so enough gas had been in to give you the right volume.
Right.
Then almost certainly the diluent wouldn't be used again, which is why you actually only use a tiny amount of gas on even quite deep dives with the rebreather.
Yeah, that's true.
What that does mean is that diluent cylinders are quite small. So mine on this rebreather is a 3-litre cylinder, and typically on a dive like this,
I know we're pausing a lot, and it's okay. You guys can not watch it, whatever, because I need to explain it.
Yeah.
Okay, because not everybody understands what he's talking about. We can't just assume we only have rebreather divers watching.
Right.
On his unit, he has diluent and bailout.
Yep.
That's different than what you and I are used to, where the diluent and bailout are one and the same.
Correct.
So his diluent gas, before everybody jumps in, doesn't have to be that big. It's only being used to change the partial pressure to maintain the set point. Bailout gas for him, I assume, is a different off-board gas.
Correct.
That means you bailed off the rebreather. In this case, it sounds like that may have to happen because there's a problem with the rebreather, and now you need the open circuit gas on a open circuit regulator to get yourself up to the surface. You're breathing back to open circuit. Two different things. I believe that's the way the Revo works. And again, I've never dove it.
Correct. No, yeah, you're right. So it has, just like the rebreathers that we dive has a small oxygen tank or cylinder. This one has a same size small diluent tank just for the dill that is used when you're working on the rebreather. And as you mentioned, we just take the diluent from our bailout tank. So we don't carry an extra little tank. We just use the big humongous one you have on your back or your sides or whatever, depending on what you're bringing.
I mean, you and I will laugh. We'll come up from like a 2-hour dive and we'll be like, well, how much of your gas did you use? You're like, well, like 75 PSI on a 2-hour dive, because you're only using it for diluent.
Correct.
Unless you had a problem and had to bail out.
Correct.
Expect to use maybe 40 bar.
Very little.
Of that. So, maybe, I don't know, 40 out of 200. What's that?
So he's talking about using a fifth of the tank of that small one.
Tiny.
So just to give you an idea, so here I have our Dive Talk Go. And this tank at the bottom is an oxygen tank, but it's little. So imagine having something like that full of bottom gas or diluent. So like air or trimix in this case because he's going deep. But imagine using 1/5 of this little tank for like a 2 or 3 hour dive. Just 1/5. Just a little bit of that tank. That's all you use. So in a big one, in an aluminum 80, like the big size, you use almost nothing. It's always funny. You do this super long dive and come up on the boat and people ask you, well, how much? Everybody compares, right? How much you have left? 500 PSI, 600 PSI, whatever. And you look and 3,000, which is what you started with.
Probably a fifth, I guess. And certainly a single cylinder would do me for 3 or 4 dives normally. But on this dive, I'm going to be chewing through it a lot quicker because it's being used. Well, it's been vented to the water. So, but I don't know this at this moment in time.
So basically, he's doing a dill flush, very slow dill flush. He's adding dill, it's venting out, adding dill, venting out. If you have a little tank like that, it's only gonna last you, that long.
But what's interesting is I just don't know. Well, he's pretty deep, so it's probably not affecting his PO2 so much. In other words, it's not dropping his PO2, but
right.
We like to say that we put in a diluent gas percent that will bring the PO2, if you did a full diluent flush, to 1.1. Right. So you can quickly bring down that PO2, and this conforms with RISA standards.
Yeah.
Most of the time they want that, not most of the time, they want that diluent gas at the deepest part in your dive to have an oxygen percent that will get the PO2 down to 1.1.
Yeah.
Because if you have a high PO2, you can convulse and die.
Right. RISA is the Rebreather Education and Safety Association. By the way, this is a good example, this video, and I know we're just started with it. It's a good example of why I believe rebreathers are safer than open circuit. And a lot of people will argue this, especially people who don't dive rebreathers will argue this. Most people that dive rebreathers will agree with me that rebreathers are safer, but this is a good video, a good example of why rebreathers, in my opinion, are safer than open circuit. If this guy was down there on an open circuit tank and his only tank fails, well, you hope that your buddy's nearby because you're at 60 meters down there, 200 feet down there, and your source of air is gone. That's going to be a problem.
At this moment in time, I'm pretty much aware.
Rebreathers are safer if properly trained on that rebreather.
For sure.
So I'm looking around for where the plates are, and you can see there's various pipes and other bits and pieces on there. So the plates were around here.
By the way, this guy,
as I look,
his rebreather's broken, and he's still diving on.
I don't think he yet
as you can
knows
see on this
what's
video,
going on.
I haven't.
Well, he doesn't know, but
straight into explaining what happened with the with this whole dive and what I did about it and all those kind of things. And the reason for that is that what I'm trying to do is kind of show how slow and almost insidious the fault that I had was, how it took a long time to manifest.
There you go.
I mean, I've done, 1,000 or 1,500 rebreather dives or something like that, and it took me a long time to realise that there was something wrong. And what I'm trying to do with this video is explain why it took me so long to realise there was something wrong. And even when, as you'll see in a bit, when I did realise there was something wrong, it took me quite a while to figure out what it was and to, I guess more importantly, to do anything about it. So I guess what I'm trying to do is with this video is talk you through my thought process. I mean, as you can see here, I've just found a load of plates. They're all broken. But I'm just wafting off the
now,
dirt there.
It's
so
easy if you pause it for a second. There's a rule, a general rule, that we should set that up right here now. That when you have a known problem on your rebreather, you initiate certain other procedures.
Correct.
I'm not going to say automatically end the dive, but in most cases that means you're going to thumb the dive and go to the surface.
Yeah.
Did he know at this point, was he wondering at this point, I can't tell yet, why is this thing adding diluent? Or is he still assuming, oh no, I'm not noticing that yet. And I don't know. You don't need to go on and on about that.
Right.
I want to set it up. If he knew at this point
Yeah.
I have a problem. This thing's adding diluent. Then the right step is to end the dive. Doesn't mean he has to bail off the rebreather.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
No, it doesn't have. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to bail out the rebreather yet. It means though that I have a problem.
Something is up.
Maybe I can solve that on my rebreather. Solving it means to get to the surface on my rebreather.
Yep.
Maybe I need to bail out to get to the surface, but there's no discussion on whether or not you need to end the dive. That's pretty much standard training. I have a rebreather problem, I end the dive.
However, I will say that this is not a decision that you make and immediately drop everything you're doing and let's end the dive. In some cases. What I mean by that is, sometimes, especially in deep dives like this, you will notice that, let's say, your PO2 is going up. And you're not adding any oxygen. You're just swimming around in a wreck, and it just keeps creeping up. It's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Could that mean that something is wrong with your unit? Yes. But it could also mean that you're not moving enough to metabolize enough oxygen, and then the trickle valve is adding too much at this depth in order to cause that PO2 to rise.
I don't know if he has a trickle valve, just so you know, on his unit.
But what I'm saying is, the fact that my PO2 is going up could indicate a problem, but I don't abort the dive immediately. I initiate a series of steps to rule out what the problem is. My first step being I'm going to close the oxygen and wait and see what happens. If I close the oxygen and something like the PO2 keeps going up, like something is weird, then I end the dive. But having a problem or in your head you think something is odd, doesn't mean you should abort the dive immediately and end it. Troubleshoot.
But it's okay.
Yes.
To end the dive if you decide to, and if you tell me you're ending the dive, I'm not here to second guess you and say, well, you could. Are you sure? Like, no, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to troubleshoot it.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with my problem. I want to end the dive. Yep. Then we end the dive.
Especially at those steps.
Right.
200 plus feet down.
I'm
out. Yeah.
I think there's a big stack of them there. They're kind of almost concreted together, but they've been broken off.
What's with all these plates?
Probably by people, trying to get them out and using a bit much force, I guess, and then snapping them off. The east point is very well dived, so by the standards of technical dives, it's quite close to Plymouth. It's 60 odd meters. It's a big, picturesque wreck.
Plymouth. I guess that's in England.
That's
right?
why it's been dived a lot. Although,
even when I hear the name Plymouth, I just got
the bell
chilly.
has never been found. So, if you want to get yourself a bell, there's got to be one somewhere on the east point. You've just got to figure out where it was and try and find it.
Oh man.
So so I'm down here on the wreck. My rebreather loop is slowly filling up with water, and when it fills up with water, it's dumping gas. My automatic diluent valve is slowly putting that gas into my rebreather, but because I'm busy, because I'm changing depth, I'm not noticing that my ADV is firing.
Okay.
Often. Now,
answered that question.
You can criticise that and you say, well, you should have noticed, and you're probably right.
But those are the people that are probably not rebreather divers that think they're experts and they just like to comment.
It's not so. I don't actually criticize him so much because it's not so easy to tell that it was adding gas. As he said, I'm continuing to go down. Yeah. So in that case, his mind, your mind, my mind probably would be saying, yeah, it's just trying to compensate for the fact that depth is increasing my PO2, so I need to add diluent so it doesn't go beyond the set point.
I do think
there's logic to that.
I do think that if he was on a mechanical rebreather, like the Dive Talk Go, for example, he would have realized that there was a bigger problem sooner.
Yeah.
Because a few breaths and you're out of breath. It's like, what the? And then you add, your dill through your ADV or whatever. You add it, and all of a sudden you're out of air again. Like, what the hell?
And that's why I love the Dive Talk Go, because we are not relying on that computer. Like,
correct.
You're having to control it. So there's no way you can't notice it. I have to add diluent.
Yep.
Like, I'm noticing it. My finger is adding diluent, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
I just want to show when people are watching this video that don't understand rebreathers, and he's talking about how his scrubber is filling. So the scrubber in the Dive Talk Go is this center thing, this right here. So imagine this is little by little filling with water from the bottom up. It's just clunk, 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 clunk. Now look, you breathe out of these loops. I'm trying to put it all on camera, which are connected to the top. So if this was filling from the bottom, all right, you can still breathe even though there's water at the bottom. It doesn't work exactly like that, but just to give people a picture in their head. He has this scrubber, is filling up, and he's not noticing that it's filling up. And that's because the air is escaping, and it's little by little, but it's coming.
Yeah, and there is one more very important thing I want to add.
Yeah.
That's magnificent, what you just held up at the loops in particular.
Right.
So whose unit do you think that is? Mine or Gus's?
Let's move on.
Can you show the loops again?
Roundabout now, or maybe a bit later on, that I do start to realise that something is wrong with my AD with my loop, and I'm going to take some actions in a minute. But I'll talk you through those.
Let's do it.
But before I do that,
here's another plate
out there already. Anybody who's a rebreather diver is going, surely you realised that there's a problem with your rebreather when you did your positive and negative checks, and you're absolutely right. That is exactly the moment I should have identified that there's something wrong with my rebreather on the positive and negative checks. So I actually believe that I carried out positive and negative checks, but it's entirely possible that I didn't.
Well, okay. Let's pause it. I know.
It's a good one.
This is a good one, man.
Yeah,
I really like this. Okay, listen. A positive and negative check means that on the surface, after you're assembling the unit, you first fill it up with as much air as possible, and no air should escape. Mm-hmm. It's holding a positive pressure, because if there was a leak, it wouldn't hold. The counterlungs wouldn't stay firm. You could watch your dive computer. It wouldn't maintain the same PO2.
I'll do it with this one.
Right? Well, I don't have a computer on there to show that part. I have one with me. If you wanted to show it, I have one with me. But do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I'm going to show them.
But while you're showing them, the negative is the opposite. You would suck in as hard as you can, suck in, and it would collapse the counterlungs, and they should stay collapsed. However, okay, when you're done, this is important. I have done a positive and negative before, where only later underwater to discover that I had a slow leak. It's not perfection, because the leak can either occur after the positive and negative, or it's so slight that it wasn't even changing the partial pressure after. You want to hold that positive for a good solid 1 minute.
Yeah.
And if the leak is so slight, it's really not moving that needle, that positive check on the computer.
Even within that
much.
1 minute, it doesn't move.
But it doesn't move. So you're like, it seems okay. It's holding it.
That's right.
It's not perfect.
So Dominic, we're on your side. We know, like, even though you don't know, and I think he's saying, I'm not sure, I'm positive, whatever. I think what happens is he wasn't like writing down on a checklist. You know how you do it during the class? You write down an initial and you're like, yep, I did that. I get it that he didn't do that, because we follow checklists, but we're not writing our initials every time, right? We follow the checklist just like every, when you're flying a plane, they follow a checklist, but they're not writing right next to every step. Maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not a private pilot.
You do.
Okay.
They're supposed to.
They put their initials next to each
one?
No.
No.
No, they follow a checklist just like we follow a checklist, right? So I can understand, and I'm on his side officially, that he is like, I think I did it and I think it passed. It's because sometimes you do it, like you said, and if the leak is so tiny, it could spend a minute, whereas the millivolts don't change. It's just dead on. And maybe the leak is so tiny that it will change every 2 or 3 minutes. If you held on for a while, you will see that eventually it will do it. But you don't, ain't nobody got time for that. So like, if it looks that it's full, like this one right here, look, the counterlungs still feel pretty full. Obviously, I will confirm with the computer, but sometimes what you do is you turn it on and it's like flicking. Have you seen it where it flicks like 0.7 to 0.8, 0.7, 0.8,
Yes.
0.7, 0.8? It's like right there, borderline, and you wait for a while, and then you open it up after a minute, and you hear the puff, like that, you're like, okay, that maintained the pressure. It should be good. And to be fair, 99.9% of times where you're in a situation like that where it could or it could not be leaking, it's perfectly fine. You do the dive and there's no problem whatsoever. So we're in Dominic's side for this one.
Well, out there going, oh, you should have used a checklist. You should have built your rebreather with a checklist, and then you'd have known for certain that you'd have done positive and negative checks. And once again, you're probably right.
No, they're wrong.
If I'd done it using a checklist, I
Now,
would have.
Now, a checklist is a good idea, but it doesn't mean that you didn't detect the
Right.
leak. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you should blow off the checklist and blow off the positive and negative.
Of course
and
not.
blow off looking at the
But the
millivolts
statement he
and
made-
blow off looking at the PO2. I'm not saying that.
Of course not.
If he did that, then I would say, Dominic, love you, man, but you were wrong.
No,
What
absolutely.
I'm saying is you may not have been able to detect it even
Correct.
following that checklist.
Yes, so that's what he's saying. The statement he made is, if you're a rebreather diver and you said you could have or you would have detected the leak if you followed a checklist. No, you can follow a checklist exactly like we mentioned with the millivolts and checking and everything and still have a tiny leak. That can still happen. So, no.
Definitely knowing whether I'd done positive or negative checks. So yeah, mea culpa. I'm guilty for not using a checklist.
Oh, maybe he didn't use a checklist.
Having said that, I think I did do my positive and negative checks. If you're not a rebreather diver and have no idea what I'm talking
Now he
about
explains
with
it.
positive and negative checks,
Yeah, let him
then
run
positive
with
and
this for a
negative
minute.
checks are a way for checking that your rebreather loop isn't compromised. So essentially what you do is you overpressure your rebreather loop by breathing into it a lot and then sealing it shut and waiting to see if so you put the counter lungs to their maximum inflation, all the loops are completely full, and then you sit there for 5 minutes and you wait to see if it starts.
Actually,
sagging
5 is
down,
probably
starting emptying. And if it
usually what
starts
we do,
emptying,
not
then
one.
You know,
Well,
obviously
one
there's
at
a
a-
problem,
1 minute
there's a
at a
leak
minimum.
somewhere. So that's a positive check. A negative check is exactly the opposite, i.e. you suck everything out of the rebreather loop, ideally slightly below ambient pressure. Once again, close it up, leave it for 5 minutes, and wait to see if it starts filling up again. And if it starts filling up again, once again, you know that you have got a leak somewhere.
By the way,
and therefore
mine
that's
looks
the
like it's holding a
opportunity to
good
do
positive and
something about
negative.
It is. Look at
So
that thing. You can
positive
get
and
a
negative checks.
paper
are great
cut with
thing
his counter lungs.
and should have picked up on this.
Good
issue.
assembly.
Now, I'm just going to throw one thing in there, which is that the thing that caused this, and you will see later on, is a little hose that
Close
was
the loop,
trapped
by the way.
outside in a place it shouldn't have been. And I actually don't think it disturbed the seal on the top of the canister enough on the surface. I think as I was going down, the depth put a different pressure on it. You know, it was mismatched pressure or something, and that was enough to open it up and to
Interesting.
compromise it. I have no way of proving that, other than I think I did my positive and negative checks. But
Honestly, he shows it at the end, so I'll let you see it. It looks like a pinched O-ring. That's what it looks like.
I was going to say the most common thing that would happen on this is a pinched O-ring. I am unbelievably careful and nervous.
Yeah.
Every time I'm putting a unit together, right when it's at that point where you're about to push down to get the two O-rings, in our case you should hear a double bump because there's two O-rings, like a bump. That's the moment where you could have a problem. You pinch that O-ring and you're going to have a leak.
True.
You know, I've got no way of proving any of that.
I really like
But
the way
anyway,
he's talking
on
about this, by the
dive,
way.
Yeah. He's
so,
great.
Straight,
round about this
shooting
point, or
straight.
maybe slightly later on, I'm aware that I'm using more diluent than I should be, because you've probably seen now I haven't gone up or down very much recently, and therefore I am starting to hear my automatic diluent valve, that auto add thing, firing more often than it should. So what I do at that point is I close down the
Ghost manual.
the auto add function. There's a way of isolating it on the rebreather, which I do, so it's no longer automatically adding, and therefore what then starts happening is as the gas leaks out of the unit,
You're not going to be able to breathe.
it becomes more difficult for me to breathe. And as it becomes more difficult for me to breathe, I have to inflate
manually.
Or I have to put gas in manually. And I do that several times.
Well, that's a problem.
Now
I've done
you
it
got a
several
problem.
times. It becomes
Undeniable.
reasonably clear to me that there's some sort of problem. And the only the only logical explanation for if you need to put gas in your loop is that gas is leaving the loop somehow.
Obviously.
And the question is therefore, how is it leaving the loop? Well, there's a couple of main options. One is that you are breathing it out of your mouth. Now, obviously, I can tell when I'm doing that.
Nope.
The other option is that you have a leak in your unit, and there's quite a few different places where you could have a leak in a unit. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've had happen on other dives is that there is a manual dump for the counterlungs, and I mentioned this, I think, during the what is a rebreather bit of the video. So the manual dump for the counterlungs is on a bit of string, and sometimes it gets caught underneath other parts of the rebreather, and therefore the manual dump is held open, and therefore you can lose gas that way. I've had that happen several times.
This is going to be a nightmare to edit with all the pausing, but so be it. What he's talking about, we call an overpressure valve, or OPV, in our Go, is this circle that you see right here. And, where is it?
Yes,
there
right
it goes.
there.
This circle right here. And what happens is, when the unit is fully inflated to capacity, if you don't have an overpressure valve, then you can explode a counter. Something bad will happen. Like the gas has no place to escape, and something has to happen. So this right here is meant so when you hit the limit, then gas can escape through it, preventing a damage from happening to the unit. What he's talking about is that in his unit, and I've seen these valves before, there's like a little cord that you can pull, so you don't have to inflate to capacity. We trick that by squeezing the counterlungs, right? Forcing the OPV to fire, creating more pressure. You just use your arms and you squeeze the counterlungs together. He has a cord that he can pull. So he's saying in dives before, that cord has been pulled, and that happened to me with the dump valve from the Katana too. It came with a cord. It's the same thing. It came with a cord that was too short, and it's an OPV as well. And so when I was bigger, the cord was short enough that when I'm on a dry suit, I was so big that it would be constantly activated. It was always dumping air from the Katana.
Wow.
So I had to disassemble the whole thing and put in a longer line, so it wasn't always, dumping the gas from it. But that's what he's talking about.
And I've changed the length of the bit of string
Yeah.
on my counter.
He also
dump,
made it longer.
so it shouldn't happen. Having said that, at some point in this dive, I make an active point of checking my counter.
Let me make sure that it's not messed
they haven't
up.
got stuck. I can remember
Right.
doing it really clearly. I then carried on for a bit longer and was still having to manually put gas in, so I was still losing gas. So at that point, I grab hold of my buddy because I want them to have a look at my unit and see where the leak is coming from. Now, I'm going to do something I don't do very often on my videos, which is I'm going to chop out a load of the dive. And what you're missing is a whole load of this sort of stuff, which is me turning stuff over, having a look at things, not find anything very useful. But the reason I've skipped is because I want to kind of cut to the chase. I want to get to the next interesting bit about my rebreather, which is the bit when I ask my buddy to have a look at me.
This is normal, by the way. I don't know if you remember when we took our first DPV class that I smashed into the top of the cave, and I can hear that there's a gas leaking somewhere. I don't know if you remember.
I remember.
So instead of bailing out immediately, I went to you and I said, "Look at me for bubbles," and you looked at me and you were like, "Let's get out of here."
Right.
By the way, every time I do a thumbs up in diving means dive is over. Let's go up. We say okay this way. Thumb up is not this is great. This is over. Let's go up. So that's what thumbs up are bad in diving. Thumbs down means let's go down. So that's pretty good. But anyway, on that time where I crashed into the ceiling of the cave, I stopped. I was like, this doesn't sound good.
I remember that.
Woody, look at it. He just looked at me. He's like, let's get out of here. But funny enough, even though I was leaking, I can hear it. Woody can see it because he's behind me. It was on a back-mounted rebreather. I stayed in the unit all the way to the exit. I never bailed out. So, reinforcing what Woody said earlier, dive is over doesn't mean bail out. It can mean bail out, but not always.
At this point, I'm pretty convinced that there's something going on. I've closed my automatic add. I have been adding gas, and I've realised there's gas coming out of my loop. So basically, what I need the help of my buddy to try and figure out where the gas is going from.
Find what's going on,
because I can't see it. So this is me. As you can see, they're gesturing to my buddy.
Yeah.
I'm saying, look, there's gas coming out my loop. I need you to have a look for it. I need you to find where it is.
See what James does.
This is James. He's going to have a look while I'm just looking down, and
stay there.
I'm giving him plenty of opportunity to have a good look over my unit. My thought at this point is it should be really easy. There's gas coming out of the loop. So I look back at him and he goes, mate,
no way.
There's nothing coming out of you.
Well, hold on. Now pause it. Let me tell you what can happen when you do that. Okay.
Yeah.
If you change your position such that you should be in a diver position.
Yeah.
And you've decreased your breathing. Now you're just chilled, so you're not actually super positive in the loop.
Yeah.
It can actually not have enough pressure for that leak to continue, especially if the leak is up at the top part of the unit and now you went like this, right? Think about it.
The air.
So really, as bad as this may be to say, you would be better off to catch this leak if you would have come out of the diver position.
Vertical, yeah.
And vertical and caused that air to go up. I bet you that he would have caught the leak.
You're onto something. I'm not going to spoil it because he talks about it in a second.
Really?
But
that's what I think may have what was going on.
But the interesting part is, again, he
is light.
He just went there, and his body looked at him.
That can stop. That can be not enough pressure for the leak to have continued in that position. It could be.
You'll be surprised.
And that just strikes me as really bizarre. I know that there's gas coming out.
Yeah. Dude.
I know that it's got to be going from somewhere. So it should be really easy to see. Why can't he see? But clearly he can't. So that's a real mystery. So I think, okay. And you start to question yourself in these kind of situations. Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. Maybe, I'm imagining it, but I know I'm not imagining it because I'm sticking gas in my loop. So it gives me an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things about rebreathers diving is by and large stuff doesn't happen quickly.
Right.
So
Very true.
You've got plenty of time to mull things over. And in this case, I'm still, although I know that I'm losing gas, I don't feel that I'm using vast amounts. I don't feel that it's a real emergency at this point in time. I'm just kind of getting an increasing sense of unease. I guess that would be the
very
the
good
best
description
way of describing what's
Love
happening. And
so real.
I think when you are feeling uneasy and you're not happy underwater and you're at 60 odd meters, then there's really one solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is to get out of the water. So that's what I'm going to do now. I am starting to head back from pretty much the engine area to the stern, because the stern's where the shot is, and the shot is my best way of getting out of the water.
Okay.
Of course, you might say, well, why didn't you just ascend from where you are? That's a reasonable suggestion. You may also say, well, if you're not happy with the integrity of your rebreather loop, why haven't you bailed out and gone on to open circuit? Those are good questions. I would say when you're diving on a rebreather and you have something wrong with you, you always have options available, and what you have to do is kind of weigh up the advantages or the disadvantages of those options. So for me, particularly on a technical dive like this, there's some real attractions to the shot line. One of the attractions to the shot line is that you have loads of other divers around there. and with loads of
And
other
he had
divers,
time
he's
to
going
get
to come
there.
loads
Yes.
of
He's
gas.
not-
So that's a really useful thing. You also are going to be on the shot line, which is where the skipper's expecting you. If you
The boats are
bail out,
expecting you there.
if I bailed out, from the engine area, I would have had to put up a delayed SMB, and then when I was doing my decompression, I would be separated from the other divers, so I wouldn't have their gas. The skipper would have the additional challenge of trying to follow me
Smart.
and the other divers on the shot line. And at this point in time, I didn't feel that the emergency was significant enough. It wasn't important enough for me to do that. Ditto. Why didn't I bail out to my deep bailout? I could have done that. It would have obviously removed the risk of the loop flooding and anything. But once again, I could still breathe adequately, even though I was losing gas.
Yeah.
And I was having to refill it. I didn't feel that I was in danger of running out of gas. And I did actually, you can't see it on the video, but I did check my contents gauge on my diluent cylinder. And although it was getting quite low, I still had plenty to get back to the shot line. And I knew that once I was on the shot line and a bit shallower,
Oxygen.
I could either plumb into my rebreather. I could use either my deep bailout or I could use my shallow bailout gas, and I could stay on the loop and just basically run the loop off that, using it effectively as a kind of semi-closed rebreather. So I had plenty of options there, and so that's why I chose to get back to the shot line. You may recall from the descent, the shot line was really close to the steering quadrant.
This guy is like the opposite of most of the videos we react to, which is a bunch of people that are not even divers talking about cave diving like they know what they're talking about. And a lot of it is just us adding clarity. Like, that's not how it works. That's not what we do. This guy's on point. Like, there's nothing for us to add.
Very well. I would be wanting and probably doing exactly the same. I really think he's spot on so far.
Great job.
And I'm in the fortunate position of having some video from James. He didn't take much video of me during the dive, but he did take some video.
So here's your answer.
Points. And the question you've probably been asking is,
leaking.
Where was all the gas going from my rebreather loop? And it's a really good question. It's one that I've not answered. And I think this short piece of video shows the answer to that. What's happening is that the gas is coming out of the top of my canister, and it's then getting stuck under the yellow box that forms part of the G-box.
You see what happened when you went like that?
While I'm in horizontal trim, it's just there, caught underneath. It's only when
I
sort of look up, really, or change from that horizontal trim position, that the gas vents, and you probably saw it there, coming out in a huge bubble.
So it is close to what you said. It's not about the fact that if he's horizontal, he's not scaping. It's still scaping when he's horizontal. It's just that the rebreather that he's using has a cover, and he's getting caught in that cover. It's the same reason why we make holes in the top of helmets when we cave dive. Is because if you exhale, the bubbles get caught in your helmet and it gets airy. So we make holes in it so bubbles can go out.
I see.
So his cover is trapping the air when he's horizontal.
Interesting.
And when he goes vertical, then all the air goes out.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were very close to the reason.
And that's why James couldn't see it when he was looking at me.
Yeah.
And that's why, as you'll see later on, when another few people look at it, they can't see it either. So this is another piece of James's footage slightly later on. Once again, you can see right by the steering quadrant, and you'll see once again when I change position, there's another big.
I'm not going to comment on the tank.
Leaving my loop.
I'm not going.
So it's really clear where it's going, but only in that kind of circumstance when I change that vertical position. So
that would be, by the way, that would be considered, if I saw that on Gus, that's not a small leak. Those are big bubbles. I'd be like, dude, you're flooding.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, it's a little tricky too because he's also going up a little bit. So when you're going up, you're gonna be venting anyway. But
but
his, it was coming from the back.
I'd be venting out of your mouth to get it out of the loop. But
so you have to be paying attention to detail to figure that out. But
I bet there was a lot of water in that thing. If that's the leak level.
Spot. So, but underwater, obviously not a clue. We're now back with me, and as you can see, I'm back at the shot line. I'm starting my ascent. Conditions are absolutely wonderful. I've probably been underwater for about half an hour at this point, so I'm going to have quite a lot of deco. By this point, not only do I know that I'm losing quite a bit of gas, I'm also aware that I've got quite a bit of water in my rebreather loop. It's a bit harder to breathe than it should be, and also I can hear a bit of a gurgling sound that's been really getting worse. Now, you often get water in your rebreather loop for various different reasons, but normally it's only quite a small amount. At this point, I'm aware that I've got quite a lot of water.
You can pause for 1 second. Now, you are developing some humidity inside the rebreather.
Right.
Perfect assembled, holding a positive, negative, not leaking. You're still going to build up some moisture inside of it. And you can hear that after a long dive a little bit just from the humidity of the reaction going on.
Yeah.
And when you dump it later and you dump the counter lungs, you're going to have a little bit of water coming out of it. It's mostly from that reaction and humidity. It could be a little bit from a little bit of leaky mouth maybe, but not to that extent.
Right.
And it really doesn't make the breathing any harder, the normal one that builds up a little bit of water. This one, I have had a leak before.
Yeah.
It starts to get very difficult to breathe. And you would be hearing as you breathe. So.
Absolutely. I will say that some rebreathers have water traps that are designed to capture some of that water without affecting your breathing. Some rebreathers have recoverability in them where if you have water in them, you can spell it out and continue to be in the unit. The Dive Talk Go does that through the OPV. You can get the water into the right counter lung and flush it out.
Blow it out by flushing it.
By inflating and forcing the water out. So some rebreathers are more resilient against water, even a lot of water, than others. It seems like in this case, and I don't know enough about his unit, but it seems like his unit doesn't offer that, or perhaps he does, but not to a degree of a full flood, which is what he's heading to.
In itself, it's not the end of the world. Once upon a time, you would have to worry about things like caustic cocktails if the water got to the softener lime. But I know that you don't get that with modern softener lime. So the only real issue is
I don't
is
understand
the fact
that.
Obviously, I don't want my breathing loop to be full of water.
Unless it's a cartridge or something. I don't understand that.
No, cartridges are worse.
Yeah, he'll have to explain that to us in the comments. I don't understand that. I know that's what we're using right there. Look, it's softener lime. It's on the floor.
I pulled it so I can show you guys.
You flood that. I can tell you for sure you're going to have an alkaline burn in your mouth. So I don't understand that last comment.
All right, so this is the chemical that we use in the rebreather.
A12 softener lime, yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty heavy. It's 20 kilograms, 44 pounds, a brand new keg. But, this is as modern as it gets. We got this less than a year ago, a few months ago, and I'm pretty sure that if you take water that is soaked...
No, not pretty sure. I'm positive you would be looking at me coughing your blank off underwater, and we're out of there. So exactly. I don't know. I don't understand that last comment. So far, everything has been beautiful. That one, I just don't understand it.
No, I don't know. Maybe they have some softener lime in the UK that we can get here. This one came from the UK, which is a surprise. We got this one straight from the UK.
We're getting the burning softener lime. The UK keeps the good
here
stuff.
In the US. This is how the payback from independence. They're sending us the chemical one.
Get over it already, England.
I want it to be full of diving gas.
You lost.
And I want my breathing to be as easy as possible. I don't want it to be difficult. So I'm back up here at the lazy shot. As you can see, about 40 meters. I'm going to take my tag off, and I'm happy because this is clearly a good place to be. But I'm unhappy because I know there's something fairly significantly wrong with my rebreather. There's a lot of water in there.
A second thing that we didn't talk about. Pause it. The other thing that is a clear indication you have a leak is your frigging sensors are wet. And now your computer is literally either not working or one of the sensors is going off or two of them are off or they all don't disagree. Because once water is affecting the electric current on
I have a sensor right here, by the way.
Water is affecting the electric current. you're no longer going to get a valid reading of what the partial pressure is because of that electric current. The sensors are measuring the volts and the difference between air versus oxygen at various pressure. That's what the sensors are made to do. They do not work wet. So far, it doesn't sound like his sensors got wet, which is interesting.
Yeah, hold on, I'm trying to.
Yeah, I don't think that's real. I don't think they're going to really gain anything from seeing the sensor. It's more the explanation.
Or the people are still watching this video. But
yeah, I mean, the Terry's still on. And if the sensors are wet, that means you probably had a really, really bad flood at that point.
Yeah.
So far, he seems like he hasn't mentioned one thing about his sensors and dive computer not reading properly.
To breathe. So I am going to need to try and do something about it. So I know there's going to be quite a lot of people on the shot line. So my plan is to get up to round about my first decompression stops and then enlist some more aid. I've already asked James to have a look at it down at the bottom. You saw that. He couldn't see anything, so I'm kind of hoping that the problem may become a bit more obvious when we get up shallow. So here I am ascending up to my first deco stop.
And because this reaction is super long, we gotta cut it right here. We gotta take a pause till next week.
That way we have more than just Terry watching part 2 or the end of part 1.
Exactly. This is the end of part 1. But one of the things that I made a comment about is the fact that some rebreathers are resilient against flooding. And one of those rebreathers, it's a unit that we own, is our very own Kiss Lunar, which there's only 7 in the world. And to prove my point, I went into a cavern and I flooded the whole unit on purpose.
I couldn't believe it. I literally said, Gus asked me, do you think I'm going to have to bail out of the unit after the flood? I'm like, yeah, there's no way. If you completely flood it, you're sitting there flooding. You're telling me you're going to go right back on the unit?
Come on.
That thing is next level.
It's next level. But
it is.
The whole episode, the lead up to it, the actual experiment, you get to see it all live, me flooding the unit. I'm going to leave it right here. Go check it out. We flooded a rebreather on purpose. And I'm still alive. Spoiler alert. I didn't die.
Bye, everybody.